Good afternoon. I'm Lee Hill, Vice President of Institutional Equity here at the University of Louisville. On behalf of the University of Louisville and the Muhammad Ali Center, which I am a proud new board member of, I welcome you. Happy birthday. I welcome you to today's event. This event is the kickoff of the university's Juneteenth celebration and the culminating celebration of the Muhammad Ali Festival. Juneteenth, the university formally recognized the holiday in 2021, the same year it gained national recognition when President Joe Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act into law. Juneteenth holds deep cultural significance within the African American community. It serves as a time for reflection, remembrance, and celebration of African American history, heritage, and achievements. While Juneteenth primarily celebrates the end of slavery, it also acknowledges the ongoing fight against systemic racism and the quest for equality. The holiday serves as a reminder of the progress made and the work that still needs to be done. We have several individuals in our audience this afternoon that I'd like to introduce and ask them to please stand. First, Mrs. Lonnie Ali. And our Mayor Craig Greenberg, would you please come and say a few remarks?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here with my wife, Rachel, my sons, Daniel and Benjamin, and welcome to Louisville, Joy. It's great to have you here, and it's great to be a part of this kickoff to the Juneteenth celebration throughout our city, and to help conclude the amazing Muhammad Ali Festival. Here in Louisville, I am so committed to doing everything that our administration can do to support the legacy of Muhammad Ali. When you think about things that are unique to Louisville, some people might first think about bourbon and horses, but we all know that the greatest is from Louisville, and he is certainly an inspiration to me. My guess is he's an inspiration to all of you, and so I think we as a city need to do more to recognize his legacy and to open up our city so that other people from around the country and world can do more to feel that inspiration that all of us here in Louisville do. And the Muhammad Ali Festival is just one of many ways that we can do it. The Muhammad Ali Center is doing such amazing work. And Lonnie, thank you for your leadership and founding the organization, to Marilyn Jackson for her current leadership. There is great things that are happening at the Ali Center. And I'm excited to participate in them, but even more excited as we approach the 20th anniversary to think about what we can do more throughout our entire city, both in the walls of the Muhammad Ali Center, and I'm proud that my budget, which is in front of Metro Council right now, has a proposed $1 million of capital improvement. But also we need to do more outside the walls as well. We need to make sure more people know about the amazing new mural in West Louisville, honoring his legacy. We need to make sure that Muhammad Ali Boulevard is not just a street, but that the entire street represents his life and legacy, that his boyhood home is preserved and open to the public. Let's get a new boxing center in West Louisville. That's right. So that people around the country can be inspired, as all of us are, by the champ. And finally, I just want to also give one more thanks to Lonnie Ali for not just what she's done with the center, but also what you are doing for our city and state. 2 Fridays ago, we were acknowledging Gun Violence Awareness Day. And when Lonnie heard about the rally that we were having with a group of mothers on the steps of Metro Hall early that morning, she immediately said, I want to join you. I want to be a part of the effort to make sure we do everything in the community to reduce the amount of gun violence that's plaguing our city and too many other cities, because we can and we must do more. And so Lonnie, thank you for your leadership on that as well. And how great is it that we have someone with us here today in Louisville who I'm sure has also been inspired by the champ, who also speaks truth to power when it needs to be spoken. And you had a wonderful time. Every evening that my wife and my sons were often listening to what you have to say, because it is inspirational, it's informative, and I know that you are such an amazing leader and such an opinion maker for so many other people. And so Joy, thanks for what you do. Thanks for being with us here in Louisville. Thanks for helping us kick off the Juneteenth celebration. And so we have a Juneteenth commission here in Louisville. It's led by a great group of volunteers, and also our Office of Equity. Joy McAtee, who I know is here with us today, is also helped leading that. And so we want to leave you with a little token of one of our Juneteenth t-shirts so that you can remember your trip here to Louisville and that what we are doing here in Louisville to celebrate Juneteenth.
Can we give the mayor another round of applause, please? Our facilitator for this afternoon's conversation is Dr. Braden McCormack. Dr. McCormack is Associate Professor of Pan-African Studies and Comparative Humanities and the Director of the Anne Braden Institute for Social Justice Research. Dr. McCormack earned his PhD in 2013 from Vanderbilt University Department of Religion, where he was also a fellow. He is also a proud undergraduate alum of U of L. His research explores the intersections between Black religion, popular culture, the arts, and activism. He teaches courses in African American religion, religions of the African diaspora, and religion and hip hop culture. He is one of the university's inaugural Ascending Stars Fellow and an academic research fellow at the Benjamin L. Hooks Institute for Social Change at the University of Memphis. He is also a member of the Black Interfaith Project, a national network of academics, artists, and activists engaged in research and action around the role of Black religious and spiritual practices in movements for social justice. Dr. McCormack is also a frequent speaker and lecturer, having been invited to speak at a range of institutions from HBCUs to Ivy League. But he finds his deepest joy in speaking outside of academia, at churches, public schools, community centers, and other places where, as he says, everyday folks are gathered and engaged in collective meaning-making and ongoing struggles for freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Dr. Braden McCormack.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Lee. Thank you to your office and everyone who put this program together. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. You all look good. It's good to see so many of you in here. And I think the size of the crowd is testament to the caliber of speaker that we have with us today. So many people, I was telling Joy earlier that we have a lot of speakers come through the University of Louisville, and I've never gotten so many calls, text messages, emails, and said, hey, we're so excited that Joy Reid will be at the University of Louisville. So we are so glad to have you here with us here at the University of Louisville and here for this Juneteenth event. We know that Juneteenth has always been special to the African American community, and the larger national community has become awakened to the holiday much more recently. And unfortunately with that, it often becomes commercialized like so much else and emptied out of its meaning and its substance. It becomes little more than a business opportunity for promotion and marketing and or political shell game to trade symbols for actual substance and freedom. And so we're glad here to have someone who is a person of substance, a person who actually does speak truth to power and who is engaged in that centuries-long Black freedom struggle, right? And so we are so very, very excited and honored to have with us Joy Reid as our Juneteenth speaker today. I have the pleasure of introducing her and reading her bio before I say that because I promised my mama, right, a Black mama, and I called her on the way over here. She was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I'm going to speak with Joy Reid." She said, "Joy Reid, you gonna be in conversation with Joy? You might be somebody one day." But she said, when you see Joy Reid, you make sure that you tell her, I watch her show every night at 7 p.m. And my mama ain't the only one, right? I know there's so many people who would testify if you gave them the mic. We ain't got time because on tight schedule. But if we did, that they watch your show every night, yeah, and are inspired by it. Let me introduce you formally. Joy Ann Reid is a political analyst for MSNBC and host of The Readout, which launched on July 20th, 2014, and airs weeknights at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. She is the author of the New York Times bestseller, The Man Who Sold America, Trump and the Unraveling of the American Story, HarperCollins 2019, as well as Fracture, Barack Obama, the Clintons, and the Racial Divide, William Morrow, HarperCollins 2015, and We Are the Change We Seek, The Speeches of Barack Obama, Bloomsbury 2016, which she co-authored or co-edited with the Washington Post columnist E.J. Dionne. Reid also hosts the podcast Read This, Read That with veteran journalist Jackie Reid and a book podcast called What to Read. Previously, Joy hosted the MSNBC show AM Joy, offering distinctive analysis and insight on the news every weekend morning. Before that, she hosted the weekday program, The Reid Report, from 2011 to 2014, managing editor of thegrio.com, a daily online news and opinion platform devoted to delivering stories and perspectives that reflect and affect African American audiences while also serving as an MSNBC contributor. She has worked in local and national TV news, talk radio, and as a press secretary during 2 presidential campaigns, including Barack Obama's Florida campaign in 2008. Her columns have appeared in the New York Times, The Guardian, the Miami Herald, New York Magazine, and the Daily Beast. Reid graduated from Harvard University with a concentration in film in 1991. She taught a course on race, gender, and media at Syracuse University's Newhouse School of Communications, New York City Annex from 2017 through 2018. Reid and her husband, Jason, own a documentary film production company. They reside in Maryland and have 3 children. And this ain't in the official bio, but they all here, so let me just go ahead and say that she is also a member of the Delta Sigma thing. Please. The University of Louisville. I forgot to incorporate. You cannot forget to incorporate. Yes, indeed. So now having been properly introduced and welcome, it is so good to be here with you today. We got the fire side in the background, which this ain't MSNBC, but it's the best that we can do. Right? But that just signifies that this will be a relatively informal conversation and dialogue. We had such a good conversation earlier when we were eating. We said we could have just recorded that conversation and played it again because you just ranged all over the place in the breadth and depth of things that you had to say to talk about. So we just get even just a slice of what you gave us earlier. I think we will all have been blessed today on this Sunday. Mm-hmm. But let's just really start informally. I mean, everybody knows Joy Reid, right, in a sense from MSNBC. But just tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about who you are and what you're up to and what's going on in your world, right?
Well, I want to start first by thanking you for moderating this conversation. Thank the U of L. And of course, your mayor, Mayor Gruber, it was great meeting you. And here, his family, his 2 sons go to Brown, or one is about to go to Brown, which is where my sister went. And I told them, good choice, good choice of Brown. And obviously, I've met members of your local government here. I feel like I've met so many people already in this room at the vote signing that the fireplace is appropriate because it's like you just at your house or something, and we're just having a conversation at home. And it's been wonderful to meet everyone. I have to, of course, greet Mrs. Ali. We had such a wonderful time talking earlier, and she's just wonderful. I had to apologize to her because my mama thought that her husband was her boyfriend. So, in her mind, Harry Belafonte and Muhammad Ali were her boyfriend. So I had to apologize to his real wife for that this morning. And it's been so wonderful so far being here and meeting so many people. So I just want to start with that. So basically, in my very, very quick short story, I was born in East Flatbush, Brooklyn, New York. At 2, my mom and my sister and I moved to Denver, Colorado. Somehow my parents got divorced and then remarried, or we don't really know how that happened, because then I had a brother once we got to Denver. But my mom raised us as a single mom in Denver, Colorado. I graduated from there when I was 17 years old. Unfortunately, that was the same year my mother passed. And then I also started Harvard all in that same year. Went to Harvard supposedly as a pre-med because my mother was Guyanese, and anybody who knows a West Indian mother, and I have an African father, so it's like, oh, my daughter's gonna be a doctor. So proud. And so she was so excited when I said it at 12 that she kind of locked me into that commitment. But once I got to Harvard, it was just, it wasn't gonna work as far as being a doctor is concerned. I was dealing with, depression, having lost my mom, and took some time off. And I moved back home, back to New York, stayed with my Auntie Dolly. As long as I could take the 5-day-a-week church. I grew up Methodist, so I was like, you go to church how many days a week? I was like, this is a lot. I'm a church girl, but that was a lot. So I moved out, and I moved to Fort Greene, which it used to be Spike Lee's neighborhood. And Spike Lee was there, and it was like a very bohemian place. Everybody was a filmmaker or a poet or artist or writer. And I went back to Harvard after a year off and said, I'm not gonna do pre-med. I'm gonna do something creative. I'm gonna be Spike Lee. So I switched my major. My whole family was appalled. All my cousins were like, she's not in the family, I'm like, this over house. So I stopped being a pre-med, and I ended up studying film, which at Harvard, they only offer you documentary. And I hated it at first. I didn't want to do documentary. I wanted to do features like Spike. But I stayed in the documentary space and really learned to love it. Very short story, got out of school, went to go try to find a crew so I could go shoot films. Wound up working at School of Visual Arts, where this preview to, my employee, and there was a senior at SBA named Joy Reid. We kind of are married now, so it was when Me Too worked out, let's put it out loud. But this was a good situation. We just bonded, and we formed a little production company, which many years later we still have, and we are working on documentaries while I'm doing this news thing. So I did news, and I worked in the news world. We moved to Florida with our kids. We ultimately had 3 kids. And I worked at the local Fox affiliate. That was my first news job. I just decided once we moved, I can kind of start over and do whatever I wanted to do. And I love news. I always grew up as a news junkie. I got hooked on watching this show that became Nightline when I was in 6th grade when the Iran hostage crisis happened. And I was just so drawn to it. And I would watch that. My mom would let me stay up and watch Nightline every night of that hostage crisis. And I just started watching everything, Sunday shows, nightly news. I was just a news junkie. One thing I never really saw were very many people who looked like me. When I sold, there were just no Black people. So I never thought that to be a career for me because it was just all white guys, And so I just enjoyed it, but never thought I could be it. But once I moved to Florida, and my Spanish wasn't good enough to get a job because I can speak Spanish, but not well enough to work in the job I was working on in New York, my day job in New York, in the marketing world. I won't go into it. I just said, you know what, I'm gonna write a letter to all the local networks to see who hires me. And Fox hired me to be a low-level producer on the morning show. I would write the kicker in the news, meaning the fun story at the end. It was just a great introduction to the news business. I eventually moved to WTVJ, the NBC affiliate, where I was a digital producer. And I quit in 2003 because the Iraq War broke out. I was very much against it. I had been introduced by this craggy old white guy named Ike Siemens, who was my buddy. Ike loved me because he would bring in his book collection to give away because he had so many books. And I was the only one who ever took the books home. Nobody else cared about the books but me. I'm taking books on everything, the Middle East, I'm taking all the books home. So he's like, I like you. So he introduced me to the guy who was the first Black editorial page director at the Miami Herald, who gave me a column. And my very first column almost got me fired. I didn't title it, I just wrote the column, but they titled it why I oppose this unjust war or something really out there.
Yeah.
And NBC tried to fire me for that because I wasn't supposed to have an opinion. I was just a digital producer supposed to remain anonymous. But the Herald, for whatever reason, put my work email on the op-ed. Because they always have to put an email, but instead of my personal, they put my work email. So I was like, I almost got fired for that. But I was very passionate about being against the war. So I quit the news business. I was disgusted by the jingoism of how I felt it was being covered. I thought the media was all in the tank for the war, being dishonest with the American people about whether there was any evidence that Iraq was involved in 9/11. Google was early at that point, but you could just look up the information and realize Saddam Hussein was not involved with Al-Qaeda. He was considered a heretic by far-right Muslim extremists, so he couldn't have been involved with them. But long story short, I quit, and that worked out for me in the sense that by the time I quit and I joined this organization that trained people to be part of campaigns called the Wellstone Action Network. And my first job was in the 2004 campaign against George W. Bush. We were a super PAC that I worked for. So we couldn't coordinate, so we could just stand on the side, spend George Soros's $260 million and watch John Kerry lose. And I was the Florida political director. I was the Florida, communications director, and my now best friend, Ms. Kim, was the political director. So we were a team trying to get, to help sort of the Kerry campaign from the outside. We lost. So I couldn't go back to news, at least TV news in my mind, and I couldn't do my Herald column anymore because they said I was now too partisan because I worked for a campaign. And I just got lucky. I met a guy called James T., who was a legendary radio host in South Florida. He hired me to be his radio producer. Eventually I became his co-host. And then when the Obama campaign came around in 2008, people that I knew from the 2004 campaign were looking to hire someone. They hired me on, and we won, and I dropped the mic. I said, Black president, won Florida, I'm done. Goodbye, politics. I can't do better than that, and then because I had worked on that winning campaign, suddenly everybody wanted me as a pundit, including first CNBC. And my first pundit jobs, I was a 2-night-a-week on Larry Kudlow. And I was the only liberal. He used to call me his Obamacon, his friend, his little Obamacon. And he would put me against like 3 right-wingers. And I would just demolish them. And I'm not bragging, I'm just saying they weren't that smart. Okay, I was like, y'all down. That's fact. And so that impressed MSNBC, and they ultimately hired me to run the Griot. David Wilson hired me to be the managing editor of the Griot, and I was a political analyst, and eventually got a show, and then another show, and then another show. So that's it. That's my long story.
There's a lot. It's always fascinating to hear a person's journey, right? I mean, you see where they are. But, you know, as the church folks would say, you see the glory, but you don't know the story, right? You see how far a person has come to eventually arrive at the place where they are now. So it's really fascinating to hear you say that. So you've been around, you've seen a lot, you've done a lot, you've covered a lot. And that's in global politics, that's in national news. But we're here in Juneteenth, right?
Yeah.
And we're here in Louisville, Kentucky, in the home of Muhammad Ali, but also in the home of Breonna Taylor, right? And I think it's important wherever we are to say her name, right? And so we're in this city, and we're recognizing this Juneteenth moment. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing and hearing and thinking about the state of Black America right now in particular.
And I want to acknowledge Charles Booker. Where is he sitting? He should be your United States Senator. I'm a little, it's all good. It's good. God works in mysterious ways. But I'll answer that by saying this. So, the thing that got me the most notice when I was at the Griot was, and the first, when I go back a little bit further, back when I was on radio, there was a case that is what got me to know Attorney Crump. Ben Crump and I have known each other since 2006. Because one of the first big things we did on the radio was cover the case of a kid named Martin Lee Anderson, I'm sorry. And Martin was 14-year-old, was beaten to death at a boot camp during the Jeb Bush era when they would send kids off to boot camps. He had taken his grandmother's car and taken it on a Joy Reid. The grandmother just wanted him to learn a lesson. She didn't think he was going to end up dead. So she went ahead and pressed charges. and they took him to the boot camp. He was dead within a day. He was beaten to death. He had sickle cell anemia, and he couldn't run. He was like, they told him to jog, and he couldn't jog. He said, I can't jog anymore. And they just started beating him to make him comply, and ended up beating him to death on camera, 4-on-1, 4 grown men on one skinny little black boy. So that's how I got to know Ben Crump. Fast forward to, I'm at Rio, and I was assigned to cover the first case that actually launched Black Lives Matter. It was in 2012, and my brain is hurting right now, to Trayvon. So I traveled down to Florida, and they sent me there because I lived in Florida. So I went down, and he was actually from South Florida. Trayvon was actually from a neighborhood right next to the neighborhood where I had raised my kids. We lived there for 14 years before we moved back to New York. And the Trayvon case was my first Black Lives Matter case. So I have covered a lot of Black death in my career. And once I covered Trayvon, I basically have covered all of them. I've gone from case to case to, little 14-year-old to Breonna Taylor. And so the thing that's so painful about the Breonna Taylor case is that it is the norm. It is not an unusual case. It is a case that is about the lack of accountability for police. And it is a reminder that we give, in some cases, 19-year-old people straight out of high school the power to use deadly force at will with no accountability. Because all they have to say is the magic word, I thought he had a gun, I fear for my life. They can just say that and get away with murder. And you give a 19-year-old, we were all in high school. Think of every high school kid you went to. Do you want them to have a gun and a badge and the power to kill you? No, because half of them are bullies, some of them are stupid. You have a lot of, you have everything in the police department. My godbrother's a cop, is a retired police officer. My godbrother never shot anybody. My godbrother's also a compassionate, nice guy, but he went into the force at 19. I wouldn't want my godbrother, who I love, to have that kind of legal power over me, And that's what we did. And in the case of Breonna Taylor, it's compounded by, I think, the complete lack of compassion in your Attorney General, who now wants to be your governor. Essentially, and we talked about this at breakfast this morning, essentially said the only crime that was committed in the instance of the death of a woman who was in bed, that the only crime committed was against the wall of one white resident's apartment. So the wall was the only injured party. The only injured party in the case of Breonna Taylor, according to Daniel Cameron, was the wall, but not all the walls where bullets went through. Only the wall in the apartment of the only white person involved as a resident in that community. The Black residents who had holes in their walls were not injured. Their lives were not threatened by these bullets whizzing through their apartments. Just the one white family, which makes a statement. He was trying to make a statement. The statement he holds will make him your governor. And so what I would say the state of Black America right now is that, Black folks have always been, from the very beginning, even before this was a country, treated more as subjects than citizens, right? We are the subjects of the enforcement of the law, whereas other folks are citizens, and therefore the law is there to protect them. But there is just such a pathology to the whole way that Black folks are treated and thought of in this country, that you don't even have to yourself consider yourself to be a practitioner of white supremacy in order to do it, even if you're Black. We just saw a case where 4 Black police officers participated in killing a man, because it doesn't even matter at a certain point. White supremacy and the denigration of Black life and the devaluing of Black life is so thorough that I was talking about it with some brothers outside the hotel. Even hip hop did it for a whole stretch. And I'm a hip hop head, and there was a whole stretch where the only way you could get a record deal is if you talked about killing Black folks. So it's like the idea of Black life as valueless is America. It is the reason that Muhammad Ali is so special. Because there are a few people who before, when you could risk your career doing it, would say, no, Black life is valuable. Black life actually does matter. And we don't have to take it. We don't have to actually subordinate ourselves to this devaluing of us. Which is why, I think my mother loved Muhammad Ali, and why I think he and Malcolm X at that time was so important. So I think the state of Black life in America right now, unfortunately, is not that different, other than you have a few isolated, interesting cases of very successful, very rich Black people. But even if they get pulled over, could easily be around the table.
Yeah, and you say that as I talk about the state of Black life in America, and you led by saying in your career you've covered a lot of Black death.
Yeah.
Right, and sometimes I think, and that's, and we sit with that and the heaviness of it, and the burden of it, and yet Black death can come to overdetermine the Black experience, right? So that we can't imagine Black life outside of Black death. I'm just curious, what do you see other than that? Where do you see those moments of Black joy, right, as resistance of Black freedom struggle? Of Black folks organizing and pushing back and creating spaces of freedom where their children can grow and thrive. What are you seeing other than Black death, right?
Well, yesterday, I had the occasion to be in North Carolina to celebrate the closing of a chapter there where Bishop William Barber is retiring as after 30 years of head of Greenberg Church. Of his church, Greensboro Baptist. And he's going up to Yale. He's heading up to Yale to train more activists. And Justin, one of the Justin, there were no Justin, no peace. There's no Justin's, no peace from Tennessee. Justin Jones was at our table. And I have to say that one of the things that I think is very hopeful is that we have a whole generation of Muhammad Ali's who are not playing around. That generation, these millennials and these Gen Z people, they have no acculturation of fear. And so I see the joy everywhere because these young folks, they have been raised, first of all, by Generation X, who we are a great generation in a way because we're between the boomers. We have the boomers ahead of us. We're the hip hop generation. You're welcome. People try to forget us and like, we didn't give y'all hip hop.
Yeah.
He was a lot. Biggie would be my generation, Gen X. But we raised our children very differently than the boomers raised us. We raised them with children being able to ask questions without being speak. They could speak without being spoken to, and then they have actually raised their kids with Gen Z even more, aggressive about insisting on their peace. The reason we're working from home is 100% millennials, because millennials are like, they have been in something called me time and self-care. I was like, what is that? Self-care? We at Gen X, we're like, I gotta work this 16th hour because I don't know what else to do. Like we don't go home. We work 6 days a week. We just had no chill when it came to work. But these Gen, I think that we are insisting, and I give 100% credit to millennials and Gen Z, that they are like, we're outside. We're just gonna do something like Black men. There was a whole, did you all see the meme where Black men were like outside gallivanting? Frolicking. And this is my favorite thing. I cannot watch it enough. I'm like, it's the idea that Black men can frolic. It's so revolutionary. I love it. Yeah. So I do, and I'm very hopeful actually, because when I saw the Justins stand up to even the elder Black members of that, let's just be honest, they had to stand up to them too. Like King had to stand up to the elders. I'm doing a piece on right now on Maker Evers, who had to stand up to the NAACP. And even our elders sometimes are like, slow down, and those young people are like, nope, we're frolic.
Yeah. And so I'm glad to hear that the whole that you're seeing in the Justins. We're down there in Nashville, and we're out there for a while, and as some other examples. And so as we bracket this between Black death and then a kind of hope, and then we see what we're seeing with Gen Z and the millennials and the like, but then we're seeing the pushback to that too, right? And so what we're seeing, of course, out of Florida with DeSantis and others who are attempting to, demonize what they would call CRT, even though they have a very loose understanding of what that actually is. Trying to ban anything with DEI, right? Trying to shut down any conversation about the LGBTQI plus, right, community. What are your thoughts on the state of affairs as far as that goes, and what should we know and or be concerned about?
Well, I think we always have to remember that as we celebrate Juneteenth, by the way, my sister, Audrey Carroll, she goes by our original last name, Carroll. If you all ever see the commercial with the cellular phone, my sister's famous because she's in that commercial. She's an actress, but she's mostly famous for this consumer cellular commercial. Like, I'm like, she's on all the time. But anyway, my sister June, she was actually the runner-up to Miss Juneteenth in Denver, Colorado. She did it in 11th grade. She participated in the pageant. And our cousins used to come every summer because we're Caribbean people. It's not part of our culture. So my mom had to like get up to speed on what Juneteenth was. And then when I moved back to Brooklyn and my Brooklyn cousins, they were like, what's Juneteenth? Like Juneteenth was a very Western thing. It was a very Colorado, Texas thing. And now it's this national holiday. And I think people don't know what to do with it, right? Because they're not used to it. But I think we can easily get caught up in the joy of Juneteenth and not remember that Juneteenth is based on a horrendous lie. I mean, like a really horrendous lie. I mean, we're gonna get 2 extra years of work out of you, even though you are technically manumitted. Like, yeah, we're just not gonna tell you. Right. We're just gonna say, no, you're still slaves. You just go ahead and keep working on these plantations, right? And part of the reason that they did that, well, not part of the reason, all of the reason, is that slavery was the economic engine of this country. No slavery, no America, period. If you didn't have slavery, the U.S. would be Europe with this sort of stagnant economy, right? And Europe wouldn't be anything either because all of the wealth. Y'all just saw well, I didn't watch it because I'm indifferent to everyone close Diana, but I did not watch the accession of the new king of England. His whole wealth is based on slavery. Their enormous wealth is based on slavery and theft, and so it's like it's hard. This country literally created like $1 trillion in wealth just off slavery. That's right. And when the Lincoln administration, when Abraham Lincoln responded to the South, literally going to war to keep the slaves. That was the only reason. Read the South Carolina Declaration of why they were seceding. It's just slavery from the top to the bottom. There's nothing else in there about states' rights and all the other things people lie about. It just says we need these slaves. We can't do it because we can't take the heat and our bodies can't take it. They're the only ones who can take this horrible heat. We need them to do the work, period, at the end. And they all said the same thing. And so keeping them was a matter of keeping the economy alive. It was a matter of keeping the Texas economy alive, period. So they did it for economic reasons, but also as part of justifying it in your own mind. If you want to think of yourself as a good person, you have to say, well, these people, this is the best they can do. They ought to be slaves because they're inferior to me. Because I need to go to church every Sunday and say something to my Lord, right? So I'm just going to say that these people are inferior, and that's been so many did. And so Juneteenth to me is kind of it's a bittersweet kind of holiday because it is based on the fact that these people had to wait 2 more years for something they should have always had, which is freedom. And so it really would bother me if it becomes a thing where like you come to our Juneteenth furniture sale, it's like that's already happening. My spirit.
I mean, that's already happening.
It's Juneteenth ice cream.
You saw the banners.
Is it 2-year-old ice cream that you didn't tell me was bad?
We saw the banners. I think it was in South Carolina where there were no black people on the Juneteenth banner. Right?
Yeah.
We saw that. It's been circulated. But when you talk about Juneteenth, behind that, right, the joy of Juneteenth behind that, based on a great lie of what black people weren't told, right, for 2 years in terms of the fact that you were already manumitted. And I just think about that in relationship to, again, these efforts to ban books, to ban TEI, to ban African American history, AP classes, and the like, because if you can keep us from knowing, right, then you can continue the process of exploitation and the like, right? And so I think it's really important because when we were talking earlier, you were asking me, and I really appreciate it, like, what's the politics of teaching Black studies in Kentucky? Yeah. Right. Well, we didn't say, so I'm in the Department of Pan-African Studies, actually coming in as the incoming department chair. Shout out to Dr. Ricky Jones, who held it down for a decade. So now I come big shoes to fill and to follow. But, right, I mean, we see that, and we are, as a department, celebrating now this year 50 years, right? We were established in 1973 after student protests who demanded a relevant education because they didn't want to be lied to. They didn't want to have an education that did not deal with the state of the Black experience. And so they protested. Dr. Lane Huston, this is it for those of you who are Louisville natives, know this story. He sat in, right? And demanded that the University of Louisville do right by Black students and by Black studies, right? And so that's how we got this department There were pioneering, fighting warrior chairs like Dr. Bob Douglas, who kept this department alive, right? Who just recently passed away, so we really miss and mourn him. I say all that to say in terms of lineage that I'm very aware that I stepped into a long lineage of chairs who have fought to keep a Black Studies department open here because it was so important to Black students. Black students who, when I got here at the University of Louisville as an undergraduate, coming here, having never had a Black male professor or teacher before, right? The first one when I come into Introduction to Pan-African Studies. And the ways that it shifted my understanding and insight and own sense of identity and who I could become and what the possibilities were for Black futurities, right? And so we see that all the time with these students who are coming out of curriculums where they're not taught about themselves, they're not taught about the true history of this country, they're not taught about much of anything, and then they come into their classroom spaces that we teach and the lights come on and they begin to say, oh, okay, I see differently now, and they want to do something and be something different. Right. And the fact that, right, there are politicians actively working, right, to dismantle that, right, it's Sunday, it's evil.
Yes.
Right? Yes. I mean, it is an evil to deny people access to that kind of knowledge, but to keep it within that narrative that you just said, right, if we can not let you know, right, either that you are free or that your people have long fought for freedom,
that's right,
that we can maintain these systems as they are.
Yeah, and by the way, you know, it's absolutely, because who would have ever thought the most dangerous 3 words in the English language were diversity, equity, and inclusion? And by the way, your courses are probably illegal, no joke, in the state of Florida right now, in any public university, and likely in high school. Books are being banned actively because the idea, and I think you have to get this really clear. First of all, at Harvard University, there wasn't Black studies at all until uprisings in like the late 1960s, maybe like 1969. And there wasn't a Black tenured faculty person at Harvard University at all until 1991 when I graduated from there. Because my friends who were studying Afro-American history at the time, it was led by a very nice white lady whose major and whose academic expertise was in French literature. And she was the head of the Afro-American Studies Department. And there were sit-ins while I was at Harvard. And I, you know, being a pre-journalist, was documenting them and sitting out and staying up all night with my friends who were sitting in from that department. And we're talking in the 90s. That is when you finally got Black faculty at Harvard. And it's interesting that critical race theory is this whole controversial thing. You know, that was also the year that Barack Obama graduated from Harvard Law School. Just wait, one quick side story. I tell you, this was when my punditry wasn't very good. I remember I had a friend, Shotzi, God bless her, she died a few years ago. My best friend, Shotzi, and she used to love to go to law school parties because, you know, she wanted a law school man. Like, so, like, we got so we would go to the law school parties, and one time we saw Barack Obama at one of those parties because he was like very famous because he had become the first Black law review person. And I remember saying to her, me and her and another friend of ours, Mecca Nelson, went to the party together. And I remember saying, boy, it's too bad his name is Barack Obama because otherwise he probably could be president. And Mecca could literally take me down as a pundit if she ever told that story. And she was there when I said it, and I was like, ooh, I was wrong. But I mean, the fact that we just got Black studies, right? I mean, the idea that this discipline is not even like 50 years old, except for 8 years. For the most part, this is very new that we were even allowed to have this information at all. And I'll tell you that learning and understanding Black history and denying that information is not just about keeping African Americans in a state of confusion so that these systems can continue to harm you. Let's just be clear, it's about white kids. And it might even be more about white kids. You mentioned that I did teach a class in race and gender in media at Syracuse University. I also taught a very similar class at Howard University. And in both cases, I was teaching mostly juniors and seniors. But it was remarkable how much more my Howard students knew about just elementary American history and Black history than my white students. I just blew my little white students' minds because I would open with lynching. And I did that on purpose because I really wanted to see how much they actually knew about their country's history, and they knew almost nothing. And my very first class was right after the Women's March, after the election of Donald Trump. And I had 19 I had 21 students, 19 of them were women, all white. I had one student, I think was Southeast Asian, and the others were Asian, and 3 Asian students, and I had 3 white male students who never talked in class until very toward the end. They were very quiet. They were very reticent to speak at all. And they were all very nervous. There's this black lady who, if they did know who I was, they knew me from Twitter. So they were like, oh, you're the lady from Twitter. And so they knew me a little bit from that. But over the course of time, those students, I got some of the sweetest letters that I've ever gotten from a person from those kids. Because and one of the letters I'll never forget was a white girl, young white woman, who actually was one of the ones who was more vocal in class. And she said, you know, I just want to thank you because we never have had the opportunity to have the kind of conversations we could have with you. And you always made us feel we were safe to talk, give our opinions, be wrong, you know, be incorrect about things. And we felt like we could talk to you. And one of the boys who never talked, hardly, wrote me as well and said, we never talked about this with my family. I would make them do an exercise where I said, you know, I told them in the very beginning, I said, we're talking about race, but don't think you're left out. Just because you're white doesn't mean you don't have a race. You have an ethnicity too. So I would make them interview their families and ask them about how does your race, I would ask this question, how does your race impact you? And what was really interesting, the Italian kids, their families could always answer the question and had a whole story about when we came here, we were mistreated, they didn't want us, there was no Italians, no Jews, no blacks left. The Irish could answer. You know, our family came from this part of Iowa, we had a thing. If they were not Irish or Italian, they were just stumped by this question. And they would just say, my race impacted me, right? Part of the reason that people like Ron DeSantis or DeSantis, I already pronounced his name today, is that he's so triggered, even though he is Italian. By the way, his grandmother got into the United States, barely made it in, just passed the immigration law that the Trump administration wanted to bring back. They said they didn't want unwanted and what they considered to be lower version white people. People who were not considered higher end whites, and that included Italians. Because Italians were just outside being black in their minds for a very long time. They invited them into whiteness and created Columbus Day on purpose in order to induct them into whiteness. Right? Ask yourself why in neighborhoods like New York, it's always blacks, Jews, and Italians. Always live right under each other. And Irish. And these all, because the Irish and Italians were considered lower class white. And so they would cram us all downtown. That's why we were all together. Think about it. That's why we're all together. So that's why we used to have an affinity, but the Irish and the Italians were told, no, we're going to let you be white. And now you get all the benefits that W.E.B. Du Bois said. You get the wages of whiteness. We're going to say now, not only can you sit in the front while the blacks sit in the back, come in the front door, and they got to go in the back door, you also, as the people near them, we're going to let you oppress the hell out of them. Here's a gun. Go be the police. Because the police originally, right, they were the slave catchers. So what we're saying, we're going to take our lower whites and say, you police the blacks. Be as violent as you want. These are your wages. This is your power. Right? And so people forget their own history. And people want you to have this amnesia. It's very useful to have the amnesia. Because in the end, there's a lot of poor white people in America who vote for rich white people to take money away from who they think is just black people, while their pockets are being emptied and they got nothing in them. But they're willing to vote for it because they think, because they're looking over here and be like, ha ha, black people, while this pocket is just getting looted. And as long as you keep that going, so again, their fear on the other side is not about Black Lives Matter because blacks were marching for Black Lives Matter, marching for Breonna. It's because whites were marching for her. When they saw the people who were in Oregon, it's no black people. It's a few. It's not, these are white people. Kenosha, Wisconsin. That is a white area. That kid that shot those 2 black, they were white. They were, in Charlottesville, the young woman who was run over was white. They're afraid of their children. They're afraid of their own children because their children are part of the generation that is already majority non-white. If you're a boomer, your generation is still about 80% white. If you're a Gen X, your generation is still about 60% white. If you are five, Your generation is already majority non-white. They are not making a black mermaid because they are liberal. They're making a black mermaid because they want to sell dollies. They want to sell dollies. And who are those kids? Mostly brown, mostly mixed, mostly interracial, mostly got black friends, mostly think that princesses are already black, and think mermaids are black. Because their friends are multiracial. Okay, so the problem is, as you get down the generations, you have more people who self-describe as LGBTQ. And so in their mind, they're terrified because they can't control this. They can't control their kid from dating outside the race. They can't control their kid from learning to speak Spanish and wanting to. They can't control their children. And so this last gasp fight that DeSantis and them are fighting is not just against us. It's against their kids. And so because they can't force them to say I'm not trans. They can't force them to say I'm not gay. They can't make them, with all of they think of what their power is, make their children behave. They're trying to fight us to make us look like the enemy to their kids. White kids want the info. Trust me, when black kids want it. When I tell you I have taught multiple classes full of white kids, they want the info as badly as black kids.
Yeah, so I want to go there, but just to acknowledge, the congregation is letting you know you're talking good this morning. You're talking good. Reverend Reid, you're talking good. I wish we had an M and B3 over here to punctuate. But you're right. At the point of the white kids wanted, you had a segment, not maybe back earlier this year. There were 3 kids in Florida who were suing, right, DeSantis because they felt deprived, and one of them was a young white woman, right? I mean, so maybe say a little bit more about that because they're pressing and demanding that they get what's attempted to be taken from them. Are you seeing more of that, or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Florida, one of the things about Florida is that Florida has been a very passive state. I can say that other than 14 years I'm allowed to criticize my former state. There's not been a lot of active resistance, at least in the modern era. Florida is one of the birthplaces of a lot of civil rights activity, but it died down a lot, particularly as you went through sort of the modern era. But Florida was a swing state because you had enough of a critical mass of even white voters who would vote for a Democrat. It's no longer. It is a red state now. And there's become a sort of kind of learned helplessness as it's gotten redder and redder and redder. So you didn't see a lot of fight. But suddenly, when DeSantis triggered something in that state, when he said that African Americans, that AP Black Studies class, which by the way, I took AP classes in high school. There was nothing like that. I wish I would have had a class like that. I want to take that class now. It sounds so good. But when he said it had no value,
Absolutely.
It just triggered something. And so you have seen marches, uprisings, anger, and yes, you have 3 students who are now suing because they're right in the sense that if you delete these AP classes and say that they have no value, that makes these students less valuable to Ivy Leagues, to Stanford, to UL. They're going to start applying to college. And when they say, well, I didn't take AP classes because Governor DeSantis banned them, well, that's the college study care. You just didn't take AP classes. And if you took AP, you take the same old, you don't look too interesting. There are a lot of people who are getting a sense of entitlement to get into elite colleges based on their grade point average. That's not how you get into college. It's not just your GPA, it's how interesting are you. It's how unique your application is. You can have all A's, but not get in. And people think, well, a black kid took my spot. First of all, a rich kid took your spot because they got in because they're rich and famous. And that's how people get in, rich and famous. That's called legacy, and that's usually not anybody but. So it's like, that's not who took your spot, it's a legacy. But you might not have also got in because your application wasn't interesting. So that young white girl, who's thankfully, I met her parents, lovely people, they're part of this lawsuit because what she's saying is, A, I want the information. I'm just interested as a person to know more Black history myself. Number 2, I want my college application to be unique. Can you imagine her? She has great grades, she's very smart, but she's interested, I believe, in journalism or sociology. But for the major, what she wants to major in, it would help her. He's depriving her of an opportunity. So that lawsuit, I think, is very interesting. You've got also lawsuits by religious groups who are Jewish-based, who are saying, for instance, that the ban on abortion, these bans on abortion that are very popular, all the rage on the right, they're saying, wait a minute, as Jewish people, we don't believe in this life begins at conception stuff. You can't tell us we have to live by Christian law. There's no Christian Sharia in Florida. So we're suing. So suddenly he's attracting a lot of lawsuits, including from Disney, because he's fighting a mouse on his way to the White House, and he's going to get knocked the heck out. I have to say heck out.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, it's time is flying, which we're having a good conversation and having fun. But I know you have 3 books out already, and I'm not sure, but I'm hearing that you're working on another one, right?
Yes.
So maybe tell us a little bit about this upcoming book project that you're working on, and what was the inspiration for that?
Yeah, so my book is called Megger and Merle, and it is, the subtitle of it is A Civil Rights Love Story. And it is about Medgar Evers and Merle Evers, who, it's really interesting because I feel like the history that they lived is being relived again, because this was a young guy who started out at age 25, working for the NAACP, became the lone paid staffer for the NAACP as field director in Mississippi, and he worked throughout the late 1950s until he died in 1963, trying to get Black folk who were in the most terrorized state in the Union. I mean, you know, Kentucky has its own history, but there is nothing like Mississippi. Mississippi was the most violent state in the Union. It lynched the most Black people. By the way, the second most lynched people, Jewish people. The third most lynched people, Italians. We used to actually work in the fields in the South. They actually literally were field workers who replaced enslaved people, and that is why it was they were used as field labor. Just a little interesting, DeSantis might want to look that up. But anyway, so Medgar Evers is assassinated after being on the Klan's hit list, being #1 on the hit list for quite a long time, as he's fighting for things like desegregated Ole Miss, University of Mississippi, fighting for dignity for Black folks to be able to eat in downtown restaurants, leading young people, students, college students, his base of people who operated in Jackson particularly, but even in the Delta, were young people. Because the older folks were terrified. They were afraid. If you were a teacher and you joined the NAACP, you could lose your job. You could lose your mortgage. Your bank could recall your mortgage. There was a White Citizens Council, which consisted, it was sort of the suit and tie Klan. If they found out you were stepping out of line as a Black person who had a decent job, they would just take everything from you and destroy your whole life. So the people who had the courage to actually stand up and fight were young people, were college kids. And he believed that, yes, the freedom rides were important, people coming from outside, but he's like, our people have to develop the strength and courage to fight on their own. To me, he was a previous Justin Pearson and Justin Jones. He was of that younger generation. Like, these were all very young men. I always remind people that, Medgar, Malcolm, and Martin all died at a younger age than Kobe Bryant died. Kobe Bryant, when he died, was older than them. That's how young they were. These were kids. They were young, and they were in the prime of their lives. And they had to stand up not only to white people who believed they were inferior and had no right to change the Mississippi way of life and the Southern way of life and the subordination of Black people, but even to some older Black people who were, first of all, terrorized, and who didn't feel like taking the risk and who just wanted to settle into whatever their niche was and try to survive. And so you really can't blame them either. But also some Black folk who took the money and spied, for the other side, unfortunately, including the leading Black newspaper in Jackson was a spying operation for the other side. So he's fighting all of that and then gets assassinated. But the thing that I love about this story is I've interviewed now Merle Evers half a dozen times. I love her. She's also our soror. We know that. We love her. But she, to this day, at almost 90 years old, is madly in love with Medgar Evers. Like, she talks about him like she just met him and is so just giddily in love with this man. I've never seen, I love my husband, but I'm like, this is a love, like, I gotta do better. Like, I gotta step up. Because she loves Medgar Evers, and I say with an S. Because she did marry again, and her second husband, I feel so bad for him. She loves Medgar. So it's a love story because the intensity of their relationship is, I think, not, and I think the women involved in the civil rights movement who were not only their husband's partner, they were the typist. They were the person that had to pack all the lunches when they had to drive, because you couldn't fly, couldn't afford it, and also you couldn't take a train or a bus because he was not sitting in the back. I mean, he's been beaten up for trying to get to the front and wasn't sitting in the back. So they would drive everywhere, you pack the lunches, and she was a partner, a full partner in the struggle, and then became a civil rights leader. So Megan released the book. My husband and I are also working on a documentary specifically about the assassination of Maker. And I promised myself, and I also promised Ms. Ali, that one day I'm going to finish the first documentary that Jason and I ever started, which was a documentary about the Fifth Street Gym and Muhammad Ali. I am a huge boxing fan. And Muhammad Ali was one of the greatest human beings to ever live on this earth and in this country. And so one day I will finish that. We interviewed Angelo Dundee's great trainer for it when he was still alive. So one day I will finish that.
That sounds good.
Well, listen, y'all. We're at 4:04. We have a tight schedule today. We know that Joy has to get to the airport immediately after this. In the run-up show, as it's listed, there is not time for Q&A. However, I think it's important that we at least allow the audience, so I want to concede a bit of my time to allow the audience to engage in some Q&A. Now, with that being said, okay, be really clear with y'all. With that being said, there are some things that we can't have. We only got about 10 minutes for this, maybe 12. We can't have a second lecture or dissertation. We can't have a promotion of your business. We want to hear about it. We have to have genuine questions. We can't have gotcha questions to pull aside. Just ask your question. We'll try to get to 2 or 3 if we can, because I think it's important because y'all came out, right? We'll moderate that, and then we will allow us to have closing remarks, and then we got to get Joy Reid out of here so she can go back and do the things that we all love her for doing, okay? Is that all right? All right. Are there... I see Sister Betty Baye, which is only appropriate, right? That our own local veteran, Joy Reid, right here in Louisville, Betty Baye.
I wanted to ask Joy, we just read about the LA Times laying off 70 great journalists, headed up by somebody we looked up, Kevin Merida, very tough position. I know I lost my position at the Courier Journal. 700 people got laid off that day. Say something about the state of Black journalists in particular in the media, since many of us have been run on, and the elder class to help younger journalists are not there to exist.
The state of journalism, period, is in a very not a great state. Newspapers are dying all over the country. They're being eaten up by conglomerates. There's less and less independent news. People don't even understand that some of these news organizations are run by partisans who have an agenda, and so you're not necessarily getting full facts, particularly in the video and the sort of television side. But on the newspaper side, it's tragic. Twitter and all of these social media became big not because of independent information, but because they were pulling all of the headlines from the Washington Post, the New York Times, the LA Times, USA Today. That actually is the content that has built social media. And so what I fear is that as we have fewer and fewer people, and a lot of Black folk who work in media, work in newspapers and came from newspapers, people like Aaron Haynes who came from the AP, from that world, as we have fewer and fewer newspapers, we're gonna have less and less independent information. God help us if Twitter and social media are pulling from somewhere that is not, right, someplace that is curated like a newspaper is curated. It's going to become more and more, there's going to be more and more disinformation. I think we have to be very worried, and I am worried about the future of journalism, and Black newspapers are dying. You know, Jet Magazine is how Emmett Till's story died. It's dying. Those are dying. So I'm worried. I'm concerned, and I don't know what the answer for it is in this economy.
Thank you. I see a question in the back.
How much glee do you get out of Tucker getting fired? And do you think he's more dangerous now that he's been set free?
It's Tuckums, by the way, not Tuckers. We call them Tuckums. So I am not gleeful about anybody getting fired. By the way, he's real rich, so it's not a problem for him to get fired. He's got all that money from the fish patties and stuff, so he's fine. But I'm actually relieved that he is gone now, and not because I have personal dislike. I've never met the man, and I'm sure if I ever met him, he would probably be terrified and run away from me. He's out the seat. We work in the same building, by the way. We've had, and some of my crew used to crew for him, and they don't know what happened to him, but I think he's just playing for money. But I think him not being on air, he's under a contract. We all signed a contract. His contract and my contract were up on the same day, January 25th, January 1st, 2025. The fact that Fox is saying, oh no, baby, we're enforcing that. If you get fired while you are under contract, they have to pay you out the remainder of your contract. So you get all the money coming to you. For him, that was $25 million. When he decided that he wanted to go up on Elon's Twitter and go on emo Twitter and start doing his show, he breached that contract. So now Fox can say to him, no $25 million, and we're enforcing it. You will be silent until January 5th, 2025. That is the rules that he signed when he took the 25 mil. So Tucker not being able to spread the deepest information, that replacement theory nonsense is very close to neo-Nazism. It is essentially saying the Jews are out there opening the borders to bring in non-white people to replace white people. You will not replace us in Charlottesville was followed by Jews will not replace us. They chanted Jews will not replace us. Even during the Civil Rights Movement, the communists they were accusing of tricking black people into thinking they wanted freedom were Jewish people. Anyone Jewish who went near Dr. King, you're a communist. Anyone Jewish who helped in the Civil Rights Movement, communist. Schwerner, they used to call, he was actually like number 2 on the hit list of the Klan because they considered him more dangerous than a black person because he was Jewish. So Jewish people are hugely targeted right now. There was a Nazi march in Orlando yesterday. So just remember, we're thrown all together. Jews and the blacks, we are always to blame when anything goes wrong and people feel uncomfortable, and of course also immigrants who are non-white. We are all, if we could form the solidarity that we had in the 1950s and 60s, between all these groups, and right now, our team is the gays, the trans, the Jews, the blacks, the immigrants, the Asian Americans who are also hugely targeted because of Trump and what he said about COVID. If we formed a team, we're already the majority. And the white people who are liberal are 40% of white Americans. 40% of white Americans tend to vote Democrat, 60 vote Republican. You put that 40, you put that with all of the minorities who vote 80-20, you can vote out anybody, even in a state like Kentucky. Gather your troops. It's a multiracial coalition that will take the country back because guess what the founders did by accident? They created a multicultural society. They didn't want it. They wouldn't like it. They would be rolling over in their graves. I'm sure they're not happy. Their little spirits are rotting in hell, mad as hell. But they created it. And you created it, we bought it. It's ours, we want it, and we're gonna have freedom here whether they like it or not.
So, Mr. Reid.
Yes, and so Lord, just one quick question. How realistic is it that we can have Clarence Thomas removed?
There's no mechanism to remove a president. Removing a Supreme Court justice is the same mechanism, the same sort of strategy. You have to impeach him. He would have to be impeached in the House and tried in the Senate and convicted in the Senate, just like a president. That's the only way to remove a judge. There are not votes, obviously, in this House. There's a majority of Republicans to impeach him. There are not 67 votes in the Senate to convict. He's with us as long as he wants to stay. For life. He can be impeached. It's the only way to get rid of him. And they have no ethics rules. He can be as unethical as he wants. There's nothing in him.
I see a sister here and a brother here, and that may or may not mean the time that we have. Let's see how it goes. But you all are doing fantastic, by the way, in y'all's questions. Yes.
The most dreading question, or God must want to answer question. Can you give us her insight of where Trump's going? Is she still really in Can he still run?
Yes. He could run from Sing Sing. He could run from Leavenworth. There is nothing, the only requirement to be president of the United States is that you be of age and a natural born citizen. Donald Trump could literally be in Leavenworth and run for president. And there are still probably 70 million people who would vote for him. There's nothing anyone can do. But if he was to become, I'm getting eyesight from my body maybe back there, my producer. If he was to, let's say, for instance, get indicted, he is indicted in New York City. That's a state charge he cannot be pardoned for except by the governor of New York. If he gets indicted by Fonnie Willis in Georgia, state crime, no one could pardon him but the governor of Georgia. So there are 2 cases which he couldn't even pardon himself for. But in theory, if this judge in Florida, who is MAGA, and unqualified to be a judge. Let's just be clear. Got reversed multiple times last time she interfered in this same case. If she were to play with this case, and some of the things she could do is delay the case until he's president. Then he can dismiss it, fire the whole Justice Department. No one can do anything about that. He could pardon himself, even if he got convicted. So the thing is, there's a lot of danger here. If Donald Trump was to win the White House again, he will pardon himself for these crimes. And let's just be clear, these crimes are very serious. This is not Hillary Clinton having a server at home and incidentally having a few classified things on there that she wasn't aware of. And then when she was made aware of it, giving the government access to go and get whatever she had. This isn't Mike Pence having a storage locker with a few classified things that he asked to be searched through, or that Biden asked, go search my closet, or search my presidential archives and see if there's anything in there, and then turning it in. This is somebody playing cat and mouse and having a man with no money, a Navy veteran who is basically a regular schmo, do the dirty work, move boxes, move stuff around in a cat and mouse with the FBI, tell his lawyers to lie to the FBI and to the National Archives, which is a crime, commit these crimes for me. His lawyers were smart enough to take copious notes, and this guy was dumb enough to do it. And imagine the idea of a former president of the United States standing side by side with a regular guy, and they are charged with the same crimes. This man has no money. Trump's people are paying for his lawyers. He used and abused a veteran. That's a former commander-in-chief. He should be a future commander-in-chief, misusing this veteran. I'm not saying you have to totally feel sorry for his valet, but think about it. There was a very big mismatch in power between these two men. This guy's a valet. He used to be a mess hall guy in the Navy. He wasn't even a high-ranking Navy guy. He worked in the mess hall. For him, it was an honor to work for a former president. He abused and used this man. And now this man is probably going away for 30 years or more. Trump faces in total 240 years in prison. We put people in prison for doing less than what he did. Reality Winner was given 5 years for doing far less than what Trump did. Okay, we have indicted war heroes for this. We have, General David Petraeus, who is considered a hero in the military. The only reason he's not in prison is he struck a plea deal during the Obama administration with Eric Holder. If he hadn't struck a plea deal, he'd be in prison. And he took some classified materials, put them into the pages of a notebook, and handed them to his girlfriend, who he was having an affair with, who was writing a book about it. That was his crime. They were going to lock him up. And if we're going to lock up all these other people for taking our national security secrets and either distributing them or even not, that guy Teixeira is never coming out of prison. The white nationalist young kid, 21 years old, fool, putting the stuff up online to brag. He's never coming out of prison, y'all. I'm telling you right now, he'll be in prison until he is old or dead. And you're telling me that because you're a former president, you can do it? That means we don't have a president. Just by becoming president, you become king. They had to prosecute him. And also, by the way, he might still get prosecuted again for January 6th, trying to hold it. That's right. But he's still be president. He's still be president.
My people, I have to apologize. I'm being told that we are at time. We are at time.
Okay.
Are there last words that you would leave us with?
Yes, my last words are the thing that you have in your own power is your vote. And I am a vote monger. And the reason I say this is that King used to say, you cannot change the heart of a racist sheriff, but you can vote him out. Yes. And even in a state like Kentucky, do not lose heart. The South is the center of the action right now. The South is reclaimable. The South is where the action is in this election cycle. Please vote. Don't let people who don't care about you lead you. Don't let people who wouldn't care if you lived or died, if you were shot in your bed, lead you. Yes. Pick people who at least give a DAR in about you. Please vote. Please register people to vote. Please let your young people vote. I am begging y'all, please vote.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being a great audience. And Louisville, can you please join me in giving a big hand to our sister, Joy Reid.
Thank you.